people actually spoke in tongues throughout, from let's say 100 AD to 1900, where the Spirit of the living God really manifested Himself. But one of the things about the history of the baptism of the Holy Spirit, why the traditions kind of broke that whole connection of the baptism of the Holy Spirit, it was when Constantine, who formed the Catholicism, said, there's going to be this certain order, a certain way, and this is how we're going to do it. And it was until Martin Luther kind of came about and said, wait a minute, we're going to deny all this other stuff, but we're going to have these other doctrines to back certain things. But ironically, when you go to the book of, actually not the book, but in the Hebrew Bible, how many times did God call somebody to raise up His people? Even though Christ, was risen up, but still, there was like this missing connection that God didn't allow, or it was either that, or people were just so ignorant that they couldn't even understand it anymore. They said, the powerful, the Bible is so powerful that people couldn't understand it. So, from their 1900s, or actually 17 to 1800s, when all the denominations were being formed and traditions were getting so tight, and with all these different doctrines, the Puritans, the Arminians, the Calvinists, and so on and so forth. But one thing that's really striking is look at the history of the Mormons. Look at how Joseph Smith, when he was young, he came across Jesus, or supposedly the real Jesus, and said to Joseph Smith, all these different people I don't approve, or something like that. So I'm going to make a brand new religion, or a brand new Christianity. Like, wait a minute. How does somebody from the occult can see something that's so accurate and form an occult, actually a cult, from with the seed? But yet, I would understand, because during the whole time, there's no Assemblies of God yet. That came in 1914. And all these different religions were just using man-made theories, but not God's theories, in the whole sentence of the word. So what happened was, 1900s or so, the Spirit of the living God came and manifested Himself, throughout the world, and people began to speak in tongues and doing all sorts of stuff. And at the same time, the occult people were bringing on their interpretations, and people are going towards the occult side and the Christian side. But yet, with all these different traditions, it was like a big mess. But yet, at the same time, there's one book, Speaking in Tongues by Curry Koch, where he said that during the 1930s, 2 prophetess came into Europe, and they began to teach people how to speak in tongues through prayer, praise and worship, or in any sense, their glory unto God. That's one of the key methods that you get to be baptized. Also, it was about 1940s, 50s, maybe 60s, when the New Age occults was breaking up. It was also the same time that the Spirit of the living God really manifested and really took form, but yet it wasn't quite there, because people in their doctrines just kind of forgotten the true sense. So I am here to really teach you about the true meaning of the baptism of the Holy Spirit. I know that in the Pentecost they had the counterfeits stuff going on for quite some time. I mean, I remember there was a documentary on my YouTube, and it was saying that somewhere in the 1900s, that these super prophets and apostles will come upon, and yet they'd be stronger than the original 12. Like, wait a minute, you cannot be stronger than the original 12. The original 12 is already strong, but I'm not going to get these certain areas. But these new prophets, like Benny Hinn, who's able to do half the stuff, a lot of people don't question it because people don't know the true meaning of the baptism of the Holy Spirit. And I know some people just say, wait a minute, I've been listening to the Lord for 30 or 40, 50, 60, 70 years, but yet there's not that much about it. You know why? Because pastors and people don't really talk about it. I mean, I know that, for instance, this is one of my comments, look at Harry Potter. You know, when Christianity heard about it, I remember everybody was all anti-Harry Potter, so what they did was they came up with a TV show like Seventh Heaven, where it's all wholesome, good son, family values, family this, family that. The pastor is the father of this entire family and everything. Oh, that looks so good. But nowhere does it say anything about the baptism of the Holy Spirit and the spiritual connection to God. You know, it's like one of those areas that's kind of ignored. You know, I would love to see a Harry Potter version, a Christian version of Harry Potter, where a bunch of kids are learning about the baptism of the Holy Spirit and their ways. And I know it goes under the heaven's business, but that's why it's one of the secrets about the baptism of the Holy Spirit. I know that can probably teach you half and prepare you for what I'm about to talk about. Also, during this time, you may want to grab a paper and pencil to write these notes down that I put together. I know I didn't discuss this in the introduction, but I spent about almost a year or so studying on this thing. I read different books, I collected different information, I have analyzed a lot of the scriptures and really put this thing together, and I thank God for all of this. If you don't believe me, I'll show you. You can see that. That's how much notes I have already put together on this subject. I think that's about it for the history, and stay tuned for the Holy Spirit doctrine, where I'll be discussing where does the doctrine, the true doctrine, kind of comes about.